In the following slides, I will talk you through some of the key elements of GDPR and what you need to know. We hold a lot of data across all of our systems. Much of it is highly sensitive children's data or medical and financial data of staff and parents, so it's incumbent on us to look after their data. To remind you, we must follow the 6 UK GDPR principles. The principles are common sense, but can be summed up as: we should only collect the data that we need. If we don't need it, don't keep it. Look after the data and tell people what we do with their data. And it should be kept for no longer than is necessary. A good example of why this is so important would be to put yourself in my position. Would I expect the primary school where I went to still have my behaviour data from 40 years ago? How damaging would it be now that I hold a responsible position of compliance officer if the behaviour records showed I was a bit of a bully in my younger years and had been interviewed by the police on a number of occasions? If my data was then lost in a breach, you could imagine, first, the trouble the school would have in locating me so they could notify me that someone had gained access to my data. And then my question would quite rightly be, why did they still hold that data? Did they have any legal grounds for holding the data when it was such a long time ago? I think the Information Commission Office, the ICO, would not only levy fines on such an occasion, but I might also be suing the school for damage done to my reputation. With all of the data that we hold, we need to ask ourselves whether individuals would expect us to hold their data, and we need to have a legally sound reason for holding the information. In the case I mentioned, that data was relevant whilst I was in the school system, and the school was bound to keep it till my 25th birthday. But after then, in most cases, it should have been destroyed. We have clear guidance at Ebor in our retention policy on exactly how long we should keep data for. So if you have any pupil or staff personal data stored anywhere in your Google Drive or in the school folders, make sure you are deleting items in line with our retention policy. In fact, schools have always looked after their data and understood the need to take care of data. When GDPR was introduced, the changes were that the legislation has real bite. The ICO can issue fines, huge ones, and police forces, LAs and schools have been fined under the new legislation. To reduce or eliminate fines, we have to be able to demonstrate compliance. That means we must document how we look after data. If we had a breach but could prove that we did everything possible to look after data, any fine would be significantly reduced. If, on the other hand, we gave data to a third party, for example a software provider, without first checking they had good data security, our fine and the damage to our reputation could be much greater. GDPR also means that we must have a justifiable reason to collect data. We can't just collect it because we think it might be useful. We have to tell individuals the what and the why. We do this in a privacy notice. Individuals have now got increased access rights to their data. In other words, they can ask for copies of their data. And the final thing that GDPR brought in was breach reporting is now mandatory in certain circumstances. When you see a company taking out full-page adverts in newspapers to let people know they have had a breach, that's because it's required by the legislation to do that. So what are your responsibilities in all of this? Protecting the data we keep from harm is essential. Sensitive data in the wrong hands can cause financial or emotional issues. That's why it is really important we know who we give data to and that they have good systems in place to protect our data. Whether software is free or paid for, we must at all times protect the data we release to any third party. Simple things you can do in your workplace to protect data would include cover turnover documents on your desk, lock drawers, rooms and cabinets, On your keyboard, use the Windows key and L to lock your computer when you leave it. It takes a few seconds, but make sure that no one else sees data they shouldn't have access to. We all make mistakes, but we are surrounded by computer-savvy Year 6 kids. We need to protect them from accessing information they shouldn't. That's why our default routines have to be secure. Check if your screen is visible to visitors passing by. Do not retain data longer than necessary. Manage your filing system so documents do get deleted. Dispose of data securely in the bins. Password protect printing from your photocopier or collect it immediately. Use strong passwords and don't use the same password for lots of different applications. If you find papers containing data in bins, report it either to the person themselves or to the DPO so training can be improved. If you see screens left open, visible with sensitive data on them, report it. If you lose keys or ID cards which can access sensitive data, report it. Don't redirect your work email to your personal email. That loses all the protection we have within our Ebor email systems. You should also make sure you use BCC when sending emails to large numbers of people when you do not want others to have access to those email addresses. Don't send personal data by email unless it is encrypted or sent within the Ebor email system. Use the Google Drive for off-site access to data. If data has to be taken off-site, take reasonable precautions to look after it. If you're sending sensitive data out in the post, make sure it is sent recorded delivery. Confidentiality. Don't access data you shouldn't look at. It is actually against the law to access any personal data unless you are authorised to do so. Think about Kate, the Princess of Wales hospital leak recently. Somebody there was accessing data they shouldn't have done. If you're releasing data over the telephone, make sure you know who you are talking to and don't release anything until you're certain of their identity. Sometimes we ask people to consent to us using their data in a particular way. We can only rely on consent when all other legal reasons for holding data cannot be relied upon. Usually we can rely on legislation to hold staff and pupil data and use it in the way we do. However, we need to rely on consent to put pictures on a website, for example. So we need to make sure that your school has the consents from all its parents. In our pupil starter packs, we obtain specific consent from parents for photographs to be displayed on websites, etc. Put simply, a privacy notice is a document explaining what we will do with people's data. As staff, you need to know to issue people with a privacy notice if we are collecting a lot of data from them. Or if parents ask what we do with data, you can direct them to the notices which are all on our websites. We have also produced a child-friendly version for pupils, so we can start to explain to them the importance of keeping their data secure. This can be found in the Ebor templates folder. Data mapping. We have documents which detail what data we hold, who we share it with, why we hold it, and where it is kept. We also need to know that the companies we share data with take good care of that data. Put simply, if you are buying some new software, employing a new sports coach or school photographer, which involves giving the provider personal data, we must first check that the provider has good systems in place to look after our data. Do this before you agree to purchase anything. We must then record what data we give to the provider. For example, before we started to give all staff's personal data to iTrent, as you would expect, we checked them out first. They have lots of your really important data, so it's vital we know they look after it. And if you want to give pupil data to companies like Tapestry, you must make sure when you first buy or use free software that you tell me about this so that I can check them out for you. As I mentioned earlier, GDPR gives people the right to access their data, by something called a Subject Access Request, SAR. If you receive any SARs for copies of data, please inform the Data Protection Officer, that's me, immediately, as there are tight deadlines which we must adhere to even during the holidays and on weekends. The basics for a SAR is that they don't need to be in writing. Verbal request is fine, but for a large SAR it helps if the request can be put in writing or put on our request form. Some SARs are hundreds of pages long and take days to compile. We cannot demand that a request is narrowed in scope, but it is a good idea to ask and can save a mountain of work for us. All SARs have to be logged by the Trust, and obviously it is important we check the identity before releasing lots of information. The challenges with SARs are basically the huge workload they create, particularly for schools, because we have to redact all other pupils or third-party names and information from the documentation. School holidays don't provide an exemption. Any SAR received on the last day of term before the summer holidays will need to be replied to before we return back in September. That may mean staff working in the summer holidays. Many breaches are caused by the wrong information being released in a SAR. So, what can you do to help make SARs more manageable? Active management of files can reduce a SAR. Anything we have kept for years and years would be included. So it's back to that phrase of delete it if we don't need it. Remember, all your emails can be included in SARs, and once a SAR is received, it is illegal to delete anything. But you can delete things before a SAR is received. Never put something on file or in an email which you wouldn't be happy for them to see and know you had written it. Keep everything factual in your emails and on your files. This is one of the reasons why we now delete all emails after 18 months. It helps to reduce the SAR workloads. Freedom of information requests are similar to SARs, but they do not involve one person's own data. They tend to be from a journalist wanting to expose an issue for public scrutiny, but can also be from an individual wanting wider access to information, sometimes just so they can sell a product to us. These can also be very time-consuming, often asking for data from several years. If you get one, let the Data Protection Officer know immediately, as we have equally tight timescales to reply to freedom of information requests. Breaches happen, and you will probably experience them at some point. What matters is reporting them quickly so we can reduce their impact. The fine for not reporting a breach can be as large as the actual fine for a breach. Only some breaches require reporting to the ICO, and fewer still require you to tell the individuals concerned. The DPO, me, will be able to help in all cases. I will ask you to complete a data breach reporting form and we'll take it from there. In the early stages, we will focus on containment. Can we recover the data or in some way limit the damage done by the breach? We may need to advise data subject if there is a high risk to them. This can happen if national insurance numbers or medical data has been released. Again, I will help schools through the reporting and containment process, but you must tell me as soon as possible. For example, if you find out about a breach at 3 p.m. on Friday, we will need to make immediate decisions on how to contain the breach, and the DPO will have to have a detailed report of all the actions taken and the potential damage caused by the breach with the ICO by Monday at 3 p.m, and ideally much sooner than that. So let me know as soon as you know, even if you are embarrassed by the breach and it is out of work hours. We can all make mistakes, and I will be able to help sort it. In other words, let me know on a night, during the holidays, and on a weekend if there has been a breach which could cause an individual harm, something like a release of national insurance information or really personal medical data. As you are probably aware, we are living in a time of litigation culture. There has been an increase nationally in claims for distress caused by breaches. This makes it doubly important that breaches are dealt with promptly and in the best way. One of the most common data breaches is loss of data. This has happened where people have stored personal data on memory sticks or hard drives. If you have anything like this, make sure you save it securely on the Google Drive or delete it in accordance with our retention guidelines. Always remember to lock computer screens whenever you are leaving them unattended. Students and other staff should not have access to your files. Avoid, if possible, leaving school data in your car, and destroy confidential documents that are no longer required. And have a clean desk policy. All of this will help. I want you to be aware of your personal responsibilities, and I will use a recent case to highlight this. Darren Harrison of Twickenham was a deputy head teacher at Isleworth Town Primary School. 6 months into his role, he was suspended following an IT audit carried out by the school. It transpired that there were large volumes of sensitive personal data on the school's servers from 2 previous schools that he had worked at. Following the matter being referred to the Information Commissioner's Office, the ICO, an investigation was carried out. Mr. Harrison said that the information had been taken for professional reasons. As Mr. Harrison did not have a lawful reason to process the personal data of his former pupils, this was a breach of data protection legislation. The ICO initiated a prosecution against Mr. Harrison for 2 offences of unlawfully obtaining personal data. He now has a criminal record and was imposed with fines. So it's really important that you do know what data you've got in your files and that you should have it in there. AI is great, artificial intelligence. We are all getting used to the benefits and pitfalls of it. In these early stages, I recommend you use AI without uploading any personal data. Each school has a data lead, usually the SPM. Talk to them first if you've got any data questions. If you've got anything more detailed, you're always welcome to email me for more information. Thank you for your time. I apologise that you've had to listen to me for such a long time, but I hope I have answered some of your questions about GDPR. Please email me if you want to know anything more. Thank you.